What is grace all about? Is it strictly for our benefit? Let's peek at it in 2 Corinthians 12, 9a for a better understanding. My name is Dave Hughes, and this is Glory Bound Ministry. And he has said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. I tell you, we are a truly selfish lot, aren't we? I include myself among all others, of course. I don't know exactly why, but this is true. I would think most believers would tell you that grace is God's gift for me so that I can go to heaven forever. Well, it's true, but I'm going to offer another view and say that it's a fortunate outcome. So hang with me for a moment. 2 Corinthians 12, 9a is about Paul, who has been to heaven in God's presence and seen unspeakably glorious things, his creation, his eternal power, his majesty, his grace, his glory. We can't relate to such things, but I imagine it's not unlike being on this incredibly wonderful vacation and suddenly we're back to work. Well, Paul is back to earth, and he's received a seemingly permanent gift, which is a thorn, undoubtedly from Satan. What was it? Well, who really knows, but common thought is that it was poor vision. But whatever it was, Paul sought relief from Jesus. And the response of the Lord, my grace is sufficient for you. God's grace is sufficient. The Greek word for sufficient in 2 Corinthians 12:9 is translated, will be content. It's used again in 1 Timothy 6:8, if we have food and covering with these, we shall be content. It is sufficient. This helps us to understand what the Bible is trying to convey to us as sufficient. Instead of removing the thorn from Paul's life, God gave and would keep giving his grace to Paul. The grace God gave Paul was sufficient to meet his every need. Remember, Paul was desperate in his desire to find relief from his burden. But there are a couple of ways we can find relief in this life. It can come by removing the burden or by strengthening us as we bear the load in our daily walk with the Lord. Instead of taking away this thorn, God strengthened Paul under it, and God would show his strength through Paul's seeming weakness. To do this, Paul had to believe that God's grace is sufficient. We really don't believe God's grace is sufficient until we understand how insufficient we are in all things. I believe this is also true on the spiritual side of our walk. God always gives us what we need, perhaps more, but never less. The spiritual equivalent of food and clothing is simply the strength to endure in a way that honors God. When we receive his grace, that strength, we can be content. And here's the bottom line, and I've heard Robin say it often, and more eloquently than I. All grace and honor is given to God. Glorify God in all things. So let us remember Philippians 4:13 as we go about this, which says, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Amen. And the grace we receive, the grace and mercy, we get to be in his eternal presence. Amen and amen. Have a blessed day.